But I'll tell you, the first game changer for us is that we got our first sponsorship, and a sponsorship was $10,000. It was by a company by the name of SkyTel, and I was super geeked on the whole thing. I was like, man, I'm on to something. I never had someone, at, you know, at that time, just sponsor a project that I was working on, um, and dropped $10,000 on the project. So this was amazing. And that's when I kind of knew we kind of had something with DSIP router. And I think that's a core moment. I think um, I think people who are building open source projects, I think we all have those core moments, those aha moments where we realize, man, we're on to something. And I don't think you should take those moments lightly. I think you should look at it and say, all right, how can I do more of it? uh, and because a lot of open source projects just don't make it. They just don't make it, or they can become hugely popular, but they can't monetize. Which I think the from what I've seen at least, the projects that are the ones that has the biggest issue with doing that is libraries. So there's a bunch of open source libraries that are on that's on GitHub today, but a lot of those particular projects don't make any money, or they make a very small amount of money. Maybe you have a few sponsors that's giving five, maybe giving $20 a month or something like that. But the amount of effort, the amount of time, the amount of energy that it takes in order to run an open source project, um, it's just not, it's not it's not worthwhile, right? To me, it's not worthwhile in order to do that. But that was the first time for us where we, I keep saying we, but it was really me at the time, really started looking at it. Um, but I think the next thing that kind of happened is we had to start like understanding what our target market was, who we were actually trying to go after. Um, I don't. I mean, I think that sponsorship just kind of happened by accident. I don't think we really knew who our core customer was until you know way later. And so I guess that's probably, as I sit here and think about it and ponder, that's probably something that I think open source contributors should probably look at sooner than later. A lot of open source contributors kind of just they contribute because they love it. They love whatever they're working on. They love it, and they just love writing code, and that's great. But at some point you're going to have burnout. So I think is I think at it's good. It's fine to kind of like blast out your project and see what the feedback is. But at some point, you need to narrow the focus down if you want to monetize the product, because you can't you can't satisfy everybody, right? So you need to really focus on a narrow customer base, at least to start. So for us, our original customer target was carriers. So we were like, you know what? In order for VoIP carriers in particular, so we're like, you know what? VoIP carriers um, spend a tremendous amount of time trying to get new customers up and going on their platform. And the support tickets of how do I set it up, how do I signal to the server, what's your IP addresses for being able to set up my equipment to communicate with your equipment, Mr. and Mrs. Carrier. We just really thought that with carriers, this would be a great way of being able to make it easier for them. And really, we didn't come up with that. It's this once SkyTel gave us $10,000, and we were like, we start asking SkyTel like, well, what's the value for you basically? And they're like, what I just said is really to increase the adoption and reduce the cost on getting people to leverage their VoIP platform. And I'm like, that's a great thing, because now we're testing DSIP router against SkyTel. They gave us a bunch of credits in order to validate that our solution works with SkyTel. So I think that that kind of was a that was a that's kind of how we got to that customer segment. Now, I don't think that was probably the best way for us to get to a customer segment that we're going to focus on. Because we didn't really do any research on our own. All we did was basically a customer came to us and said, "Hey, we want to give you a $10,000 sponsorship." And we're like, "Yes, that's great." And we looked at it and said, "You know what? Maybe other carriers want to do this." And no other carrier ever gave us money to sponsor the project. So, and a lot of that is, you know what? We didn't try that hard either. I mean, we didn't send out letters. We didn't go after carriers. We didn't do any of that stuff. But simply by what we were doing. So one of the things we did in the product is that we made it real easy for people to use DSIP router with a carrier, because we shipped DSIP router with a set of carriers already set up, configured, ready to go. And I thought that would be awesome. I thought carriers would look at this and be like, "Oh man, this is great. I can make sure it's all up to date. We can do integration testing." But that wasn't really the customer segment that really wanted to fund us. So it took a while. We continue to do more consulting engagements, leveraging DSIP router, and then it was finally we started realizing that we need to have a subscription model in place. And even before that, we actually was trying to sell admin courses. Like, we were selling courses to teach people how to use DSIP router. Problem with that for us is that DSIP router is super simple. We've made it super simple. That was our design principle. We didn't want to make it complicated. There's so many products in the enterprise world, in the open source world, that are super complicated, hard to use. Like, it'll take a long time to figure out how to use. With DSIP router, you can go in and set it up within 10, 15 minutes. And most of that time is for it to install. And it installs everything. It installs Camillio, installs a web server, it installs the UI. So everything, RTP engine, all the things you need is already installed for you. So I think that the biggest thing is that we just had to figure out who cared about the product. And we took the time just to kept doing consulting engagements, understanding what those needs were, and then we got to the point where we landed on, let's have a subscription. And actually, what happened, the thing that kind of started this whole subscription thing, is that COVID happened, and people needed to work from home. And so all these VoIP carriers are trying to figure out how to interconnect with Microsoft Teams. Because I think MS Teams, hands down, was the winner of communication during COVID. I love Slack. We use Slack every day, but I think MS Teams won it, like, hands down. So all the organizations out there, well, there's one problem, is that MS Teams was great for doing internal communication. They also had the ability to have calling plans to use the Microsoft's services for making outbound calls, but they were super expensive. And a lot of companies already had agreements with certain carriers that they couldn't break to provide dial tone to them. So we came up with a module inside of Decent Router that allows you to connect Microsoft Teams to Decent Router, and then Decent Router will communicate with your carrier. So it was a great solution. We were like super dope. It has some issues with it. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, it has some issues, but um, it was it was it was a good solution for people who didn't want to spend a lot of money in getting that going, because we had priced it um, pretty aggressively, and so we that was our start of our subscription business. Hey folks, you just got done watching another episode of Building a $1 Million Open Source Business. Please click the subscribe button if you got value out of this content. Talk to you soon.